Feel Good Breakfast Show. It is a Tuesday. Good morning, if you didn't realize, but that means that we're talking all things to do with dating and relationships. I'm very excited to get into today's conversation because it covers the complex world of modern dating and dealing with the pressures of society. I know I've been there, where traditional norms and expectations around relationships are constantly being challenged and scrutinized and redefined. But what happens when you don't fit into the mold of what's considered normal? And I got to say normal like this,
well,
right?
on this show, normal is not quite normal, so we understand that, okay? But we do need to unpack this because it's quite a dynamic space. And joining us to do some deeper diving into this conversation is Brett Funnish-Scaife, who is a clinical psychologist, and he is going to be helping us get into the meat of this discussion in terms of what we can do practically for ourselves, not for anybody else, but just for ourselves. Brett, thank you so much for being here, my friend. Absolutely love you. Love the ink work on our couch this morning.
He's the coolest clinical psychologist I've ever seen.
You've made us all cooler. Thank you, dude. I appreciate you. How are you doing at this crazy time of the year? How are you handling your emotions in this this maelstrom of the end of the year, man?
So I'm doing quite well. I think I'm officially on leave. I think it's that time of the year to recharge, to relax, to rejuvenate basically for the new year again.
Well, I'm sorry we got you here working on the couch. Well, at least you're on the couch this time, so maybe a slight role reversal,
That's no pressure to us. But let's get into talking about dating in today's world. I think that now more than ever we have more eyes on us, and it almost feels like there's added pressure when it comes to not quite meeting up to society's norms, right? And when you do miss that mark, how exactly do you navigate that, and what impact does it have on your mental health, for example?
So I think it's important to understand, what is the norm? And I think anything that starts today's eyebrows, I think would be so-called outside of the norm.
Right.
But I think we live in a world that's evolving, and I think our understanding of what a relationship should be versus what it can be is changing.
Yeah.
And so there are areas that still touch on taboo or areas that people misunderstand, and I think we try to move towards how can we support people, how can we help people to, I think, understand themselves and feel, again, understood or heard, I guess. And I think of you asked the question of what impact. I work with a lot of people who are incredibly anxious or depressed, or just unhappy because they feel that they aren't able to be quite authentic.
So, I'm glad you used that word.
So
maybe we want to create safe places, but I suppose there is within that a very unsafe notion that someone else is going to do it for you. So by that same stretch, we are looking for validation from the outside. We want to feel like we fit because the outside is letting us fit. But ultimately, you're going to have to fit within yourself. You're going to have to sit with yourself and be okay and feel safe when you're entering into a relationship. How do we take care of ourselves first before we've even gone there and had the risky relationship or pushed the boat out in that sense? How do we start to navigate relationships, especially when we're entering into uncharted water? How do we look after ourselves?
So, I mean, I really love that question. I was thinking of the part where we actually have to learn to nurture ourselves. And it sounds very cliche when we say love ourselves before we enter a relationship, but we truly have to. We have to do a lot of that self-exploration. Where we need to understand who we are, so that a relationship doesn't complete us, it complements us.
I love that. Brilliant.
And so therapy helps that. You can read up on a lot of things on the internet. You also have to use discernment, what information do I use or what do I discard?
Not everything is applicable to you just because you're reading it right now.
Exactly. And especially when we think about these non-traditional approach to relationships, many people are exploring either their sexuality or their boundaries within relationships in these days. Is there help for that sort of thing? If you want to navigate it, can I reach out to you? Is there a community that I can maybe lean on? How exactly do I find myself in a safe space within different relationships?
So there's a lot of different types of therapists, registered counselors, psychologists, you get pastoral counselors. I think you have to choose something that resonates with you. For me, one of the things that I think is quite important is find a safe space, a space where you don't feel judged. Or I also like to think a space where you aren't given advice, but a space where you can rather tap into your own resources and that person empowers you so that your decisions going forward would be healthier, I think.
I like that. Maybe you can offer some advice for, and not just for the psychologists and those within the professional space wanting, because it feels like you've got a lot of really good experience, lived experience in this space. For anyone that's wanting to be of help, maybe just even a family member of someone who is clearly going through turmoil in that space because of a new relationship, that's like, and I like that word, uncharted territory, where it's difficult to know what to do. What advice do you have for someone wanting to offer help and assistance in that way?
Listen.
Listen.
Listen. Don't listen to respond, but just listen so that the person feels heard. Allow that person to feel understood. And I think that's the basis of what helps so many people, is when they feel heard, when they are feeling that you aren't sitting there judging them and wanting to respond and say, do this, do that. And I think often, you know, when, for example, when a relationship isn't working, we're all telling people, don't be with this person, do this, do that. And what do? They do the opposite of it. But it's because they're actually just wanting the nurturance to be held, or, you know, emotionally. And I think that for me is one of the most important.
And sometimes physically too. Sometimes we just need a hug, you know what I mean?
Just take
we
my
love,
hand.
you know, take my hand. We laugh a lot, but on social media right now, there's this trend going, we listen, we don't judge. And I feel like that's something we can carry in this space too, especially when dealing with relationships that don't look normal, are not experienced as the norm. But we want to continue this relationship chat in just a little bit. And of course, we want you to weigh in on social media. So head over to Expresso Show to tell us exactly what you think about this. And then also leave a voice note via WhatsApp. That number again is 0634 088863.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. It's a Tuesday. That means we are talking all things dating and relationships. Well, not all things. Today we are focusing on the unconventional. We are covering a very complex space when it comes to the dating game, dealing with the pressures of society where traditional norms and expectations around relationships are constantly being challenged and redefined. But what happens when you don't fit into any one of those molds, that idea of normal? Well, clinical psychologist Brett Vanishcave is here to continue our conversation. And maybe we thought we were having a chat because it is quite a broad term to say unconventional relationships. But I suppose in the South African sense, we get a lot of this. So in your experience, what kind of unconventional relationships have you encountered that people might be grappling with right now?
Yeah, so South Africa is quite diverse. So in terms of non-traditional, I think lots of things pop up. So we think in things that's outside of our days. We think in things like polygamy, for example, across religion. There's long distance, or even dating over the net, for example, virtually. So these are things that present, or people start experiencing distress around, I would say. Yeah.
And I know you mentioned earlier it's all about self-love first, but I think we got to touch on that self-preservation a little bit, because when it does come to taking care of your well-being, do you have some tips along the way that you could tell somebody now before embarking on a relationship, or if you're in one currently, into faith, into race, what exactly could they be doing?
So in terms of self-preservation, boundaries comes to mind first. And I think understanding yourself so you know where you need to place your boundaries. So what does or doesn't resonate with you also. And I don't think it's about us thinking that we're superior or inferior to people. It's just about us recognizing what is or isn't for us, essentially.
Sure, those boundaries are so vital.
It becomes quite an interesting exercise to go through, because often we are the worst at keeping our own boundaries and we expect everyone else to maintain them, but we let people into our spaces or to walk over us, or we often do the behavior ourselves to create that lack of safety. I'm thinking relationships are tough enough as it is. Even just down the line, no relationship feels conventional because every person is so ultimately different. But when you've got added pressures on that, it's going to make it so much more challenging. So in order to foster more communication in the space, to create a culture of more inclusivity, how do we need to reframe? How do we need to talk about things differently? And this can be advice to everybody out there, because we need to be able to talk about these things in the mainstream, like we're not talking about someone who is completely different and an outlier and on the outside. And that kind of feels like what we're doing.
So in terms of reframing, I think we always say communicate, But I think not speaking is also communicating something. So what comes to mind is, let's communicate effectively, let's communicate in a healthy way. So do we respect what our partner is sharing with us? Are we hearing what our partner is sharing with us? And again, do we understand it? And if we don't understand it, ask for clarification. So don't hear what you think, you know, they
The
may be.
confirmation bias. Don't just wait to hear. Yeah.
So having those conversations, and we always say, speak about the things we don't want to. So think about financial stuff, you know, how do you actually navigate, and give each other examples. So if I had a credit card, or if I want to buy a car, or, you know, these are my goals down the line, and are you guys able to compromise, or do you feel that certain things you have to stick by? Because again, you might be unhappy if you just throw in your dreams or goals away.
Completely. But then also lies the building blocks of a relationship, where you can see how you can help complement, improve, enhance each other with the way that you are.
100%. Thank you so much for that, Brett. We have some people that tuned in and, of course, want to weigh in on the conversation. So let's have a look what you had to say, Expresso fam, and thank you for watching.
Oh, we've got some great comments coming through here. Let's get an angle on what Annie is saying. I don't date, but I do spy and suss potential partners out, so I'm not left with a disappointment because they didn't meet my dating criteria. It's much better to look out for a soulmate than to date multiple partners, which could be adding to their conquest list. We should be wary of dodgy characters which come as wolves in sheep's clothing. Therefore, we avoid any unnecessary heartache. Well, boundaries have been put in place, y'all.
Annie.
To the point that she ain't even dating. I mean, there's a lot in there. It kind of feels like that might have been covered by a past experience or something along those lines. But being that guarded, surely there's a danger in kind of being that wary of relationship.
Yeah, so I think that's the part where we touched on. We were saying self-exploration, and if there's, I want to say, things you're holding onto, it's actually important to work through that, because being guarded, even if you're not seeking a relationship, it isn't healthy for you. It isn't healthy for your nervous system, for your physiology.
For sure.
You're going to continuously feel distressed.
Yeah.
But also in that, something that came to mind was allowing relationships to come to you. I think we often seek relationships, and we seek certain qualities in somebody that may look visually appealing to us. Allow people to resonate with us, as opposed to seek that out, you know, in people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Invite them into your space. Okay, this is getting way too deep for me. I'm going to go to the kitchen and make some delicious food. Now I'm going to let you get into some more comments, and I'll prepare some sweet
Please do,
treats in
Gray. I'll
advance.
see you in just a little bit. But we've got one more comment that came through, and thank you so much for weighing in on this very interesting conversation. Let's see what you have to say. Okay, we got another one from Boitamelo, who says, dating is like working 9 to 5 and overtime. Extremely exhausting. But however, if your partner could show interest and make efforts to your values and supporting your needs, there will be massive respect and humble beginnings. It feels like you're on a holiday each and every time. That's also interesting. So I think that respect thing really does play its part. I mean, we mentioned you've got to listen and not judge. You've also got to create a safe space. But to do that, respect needs to be established as a foundation, no?
Correct. No,
Yeah.
I think respect should be a part of any relationship, whether it's a romantic one, whether it's a work one. So any respect should be the basis. I also, listening to this now or reading it and thinking, a relationship shouldn't be that strenuous. And it doesn't say there, but we have to ask the question, why is it that strenuous?
Sure.
Why does it feel like such a full-time job?
Right.
And for me, I would say it becomes a little bit better or healthier when you complement each other, learning what are your strengths and what type of support do you need from your partner.
I like that. And I love what you said at the start of this conversation, Brett, that you're not completing each other, you're complementing one another at the end of the day. That is something that you can carry with you as well. As you explore relationships, whether they are in the norm, outside of the norm, adjacent to the norm, whatever it may be, they are valid, they are worthy, and they definitely need some support around you. So make sure that you get that. Brett, thank you so much for coming through. Appreciate you. What's happening in the kitchen, G?